I'm glad I'm now invited to speak about bullshit in a lot of places. I think it's a great achievement in my career. I'd like to teach bullshit for the rest of my life. See, it's a very interesting topic. So I will explain what I mean by bullshit epistemologies. And the talk will be a sort of short introduction to the concept of bullshit, especially for those who are not familiar with the philosophical idea of bullshit. And I will add some personal ideas and show some ongoing research that are relevant to the idea. But very broadly, I think that bullshit is a very important concept if you want to understand how post-truth and fake news work. So I'd like to start with a very short story. Call it a parable. It's the story of the ghost mantis and the humble cricket. So this is the ghost mantis. It's pretty widespread in Africa. It's a very small insect that you will notice. It's beautiful. It looks like something else than an insect, right? It looks like a dead leaf. Cricket just looks like a cricket. So this is very common in the natural world. It's called mimicry. In this particular case, it's called masquerade. And you can guess why the ghost mantis looks like a dead leaf. It's a type of protective mimicry. So that predators will leave the ghost mantis alone. And so the ghost mantis will survive because predators will mistake it for a dead leaf. And a dead leaf is innocuous, it's boring, it's not interesting, it's inedible. So thanks to its appearance, the ghost mantis usually can survive longer than other types of insects. Right, so this particular case is very interesting and different because in this case, the ghost mantis is not the prey, it's the predator. The ghost mantis is the predator and the cricket is the prey. And so the question that until now was not resolved is whether this type of masquerade is useful for predators too, and not just for protection. So this paper was published last year in Current Biology, and it's the first demonstration of aggressive masquerade in any species, the first documented case. And the demonstration is pretty straightforward and a little bit cruel. So the experiment goes this way. The author raised, these are the results, I will come to this in a second. But the author raised crickets from birth in 3 different environments. He had crickets that lived in a small arena covered with dead leaves. So these crickets were familiar with dead leaves. Other crickets never saw a dead leaf in their lives. They were raised in an empty arena. Until other crickets were raised in an arena with leaves that didn't look like dead leaves and so didn't look like the ghost mantis. And you can guess what happened. What happened is that when you introduce the ghost mantis to the crickets that were completely familiar with dead leaves got eaten very quickly, in about 20 seconds. Crickets that were totally unfamiliar with dead leaves survived much longer. Well, a little bit longer. They got eaten in the end because the experiment takes place in an arena, so none of the crickets survived this experiment. But crickets that were completely unfamiliar with dead leaves survived like twice as long at least. And then the crickets that were raised with leaves that didn't look like the ghost mantis also survived much longer. And there were also praised to much larger number of failed attacks by the ghost mantis. So of course, this is not a conference about biology, but you can see where I'm getting at, I guess, is that for this particular case of aggressive masquerade to work, the crickets must be familiar with dead leaves, and so this demonstrates that the only way for aggressive masquerade to work is to exploit the familiarity of the prey, of the victim, with its predator, attacker. Now, I don't want to push the analogy too far, but perhaps you can see where I'm getting at. This is a case of deception that's widespread in nature. Yeah. This is the first demonstration of aggressive mimicry, but that's because it's very difficult to demonstrate in the real world. But it's the norm in nature. This is not an exceptional case. This is business as usual in the natural world. So it's deception, but there is no lying, there is no intention. There's probably no knowledge and no belief involved in this type of deception. It's just natural selection at work by a blunt process of mindless deception. And it works by cognitive exploitation. This is different from crypsis, also known as camouflage, which works by perceptive exploitation. This is the prey or the predator mixing with the background in general. So it exploits perceptual processes, but here it's cognitive exploitation in some way because it depends on the familiarity of the cricket with this particular shape here. And so there are two lessons to draw from this. First of all, as soon as you have a signaling system emerging in nature, in the natural world, you will get deception. This is not an aberration. This is not some kind of weird trick. It's just a natural process that will happen. There are very good models in evolutionary biology of this type of processes. As soon as you have a signaling system, you will get some type of deception. As signaling systems evolve towards more sophisticated types of communication, of course, the deception will get increasingly sophisticated. Now, more generally, this is not a scandal. This is not a problem for evolutionary biologists. They're not trying to find solutions to this war between the cricket and the ghost mantis. They don't see it as some type of aberration or fake news that needs to be solved. It's just business as usual. So it seems to me that the problem of post-truth and fake news is also business as usual because we have a very sophisticated system of communication, and we will end up with any types of mimicry, fakery, lies, and deception. But of course, we see this as a problem, and we need to find solutions. So we create this arms race. That is exactly why this type of deceptive systems evolve. There is an arms race between deception and counter-deception. So the more we find solutions for fake news, we can expect that fake news will also evolve. Again, I don't want to push the analogy too far, but it's also good news. I think this short story of the ghost mantis and the cricket shows that if we need real news to have fake news, we need truth to have post-truth. Otherwise, the system of communication will never stabilize. And the more fake news we have, I think, also shows that we still somehow must rely and still continue to rely on some kind of concept of the truth. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So now I will talk about bullshit and how this relates to this general framework of signaling theory. Right. So when we think about bullshit, we think about a lot of different things. Perhaps you have used this type of bullshit cards in staff meetings or faculty meetings. We all have tons of bullshit meetings, completely meaningless, and we can play this game and just tick the boxes when we hear words such as thinking outside the box, reaching outcomes, walking the talk, all kinds of bullshit buzzing words. We also think of bullshit with the specific type of TED talks that involve kind of bullshit equations and meaningless equations such as this. This is supposed to explain the attention economy. This is complete bullshit. I could talk for hours about this particular guy, but I'm not doing this now. And this of course, is the bullshitter in chief. But more generally, when we think about bullshit, we think about politics, and especially political speeches and political interviews. It seems to be that in the political world, bullshit is highly prevalent. It's also prevalent in business, in the corporate world. So this is just a grocery store. It's a brand in the US. It's a supermarket. And this is the mission statement or the vision statement of this particular supermarket. I won't read it. It's pure bullshit, the type of mission statements that you can read. I had to refrain to choose one from my university or your university, but you can go check, and eventually you will find probably there's a lot of bullshit in this type of mission statements of what your university or your particular business is supposed to achieve in the real world. Usually it's to make the world a better place, or that kind of bullshit. Now, bullshit is also a skill. We all need bullshit. We need a lot of bullshit to make it through the day, especially the kind of comforting bullshit that some people want to hear, and we need to produce this bullshit, again, to make it through the day, to be polite with people. Anyway, the point of bullshit is not that it's necessarily bad, but it's prevalent. It takes many shapes. It's a complicated concept. But I think that we know a lot more about bullshit thanks to Ari Frankfurt. If you haven't read this essay on bullshit, I will recommend it. You can find a PDF easily on the web, or you can find the book that was published in 2005. The essay originally was published in '86, but then it was published as a book during the Bush era, which was, around the war in Iraq, around 2003 and such. Princeton University Press thought that this would be a good idea to republish this essay in the form of a short book. And the book is exactly the same as the original essay. Frankfurt didn't take the trouble to update it in any way. Well, how many here, if I can ask, have read Frankfurt's essay on bullshit? Yeah. So I will recommend for the others that you try to find it. It's very interesting. It's very short, and it's been, I think, very, fruitful for thinking about all kinds of phenomena that are very trendy today, at least since 2016. Here is three quotes from this essay. The first one is, well, the general definition of bullshit is that it's a type of indifference towards truth. The fact about himself that the bullshitter hides is that the truth values of his statements are of no central interest to him. What we are not to understand is that his intention, the bullshitter's intention, is neither to report the truth nor to conceal it. So he's hiding something, but it's not exactly clear what he's hiding. He's hiding the fact that he doesn't care about what he's saying. So the essence of bullshit is a lack of concern with truth, and somehow bullshitters are bullshitting because they're trying to get away with something. This is the first point. The second point makes it clearer why bullshit could be a useful concept, and it's because it's different from lying. So the statement, the bullshit statement, usually is grounded neither in a belief that it is true, nor, as a lie must be, in a belief that it is not true. So it is just this lack of connection to a concern with truth, this indifference to how things really are, that I regard as the essence of bullshit. And so bullshitting is different than lying, because liars at least must pay attention to what is true in order to lie. So they care about the truth in order to hide it. And Frankfurt also says that bullshitting is worse than lying because bullshit progressively corrupts our respect for the truth. At least the liar must keep track of his lies. So he must keep an eye on the truth. If you bullshit, you don't care for the truth, and so in the long run, you start progressively to not care at all about the truth. And this is why, according to Frankfurt, it's a worse danger than lies. And finally, this is a very striking and often overlooked aspect of Frankfurt essays. The cause of bullshit, according to him, is well, first of all, on the functional side, bullshit is used and is unavoidable, he says, whenever circumstances require someone to talk without knowing what he is talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know whether what you're saying is true, and you don't know whether it's wrong, because you don't know what you're talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then you cannot say the truth, and you cannot lie, so you must bullshit. This is on the functional side. Now, on the, let's say, on the phylogenetic or ontogenetic side, the origins of bullshit, he says, could be precisely that it's a wrong idea about the kind of skills that are required if we are to live in a democracy. And one of these skills is to think things about stuff that we don't know anything about. So this is an idea of democracy that as a free citizen, as a competent voter, you should know what you're doing and you should have opinions about a lot of things. And so you are required oftentimes to express opinions about things you don't know nothing about because you have free speech, you have freedom of opinion, and so you must have an opinion, and this inevitably leads to bullshit. And he also said that this could be enforced by what he calls anti-realist philosophies. Well, we all know what he has in mind, I guess. These are the type of epistemologies that are suspicious about truth, that say that truth really is a concept in the hands of those that have power to oppress the masses, and that kind of stuff. So he says that this suspicion towards truth would lead to bullshit. And when you combine this idea that everyone is entitled to his opinion and must have an opinion, and that truth really is a relativistic concept, and that everyone is entitled to have his own truth, so this leads to the idea that authenticity and sincerity are more important than accuracy and being right. So if there is no truth, if everybody is entitled to his own opinion, that what matters is that you truly believe in yourself, you speak with your heart, and no one is entitled to take this away from you. It's an offense if someone says that you are wrong. Why should you be wrong? Because after all, it's your opinion, it's what you believe in, and no one has the right to tell you that you are not correct in your opinion. So an opinion becomes de facto the truth because it's yours, and so feeling authentic and sincere is bullshit. This is the end of the last sentence of the essay. It's very striking. Sincerity itself is bullshit. I'll come back to this later. So this, in a nutshell, is the theory of Frankfurt. And if you have already read the essay, you can read it again, and you will see that it's very rich, in fact. It's short, but it's very dense, and it has a lot of ideas, and the more you read it, the more you start finding new ideas and new objections, of course. And so I've written an entire book on this idea of bullshit, where I spent about 200. The original essay of Frankfurt is 20 pages. So I wrote about 150 pages on this essay, trying to explain the strengths and the weaknesses of Frankfurtian bullshit. There are a lot of problems with Frankfurtian bullshit. Perhaps I'll give one example. The first of it is that Frankfurt tends to think that bullshit is intentional. People produce bullshit to get away with something. A political speaker will produce a bullshit speech to look patriotic, to look popular, close to the people, and so forth, and he does it intentionally. But when you think about it, it's bizarre to say that you could be intentionally indifferent to truth, or to anything, actually. How can you be intentionally indifferent to anything? I think it's incoherent. It's one example of an incoherent aspect of the theory. So I spent also a lot of time speaking about the social and cultural aspects of bullshit. Bullshit will depend on a special culture and institutional structure where you evolve, where you live, where you navigate. I'm not a philosopher, but I also try to draw some links on bullshit, knowledge, beliefs, and language, and so forth. There's been a lot of writing on alternative theories of bullshit, so I review these. Also, I study, this is my specialty, I mean, that's the field I know best, the conspiracy theories, so I claim conspiracy theories are bullshit. And finally, I claim that, in fact, when we speak about post-truth, we're really speaking about bullshit having reached some kind of critical mass where it becomes the norm in the environment. I don't say that this is the case, actually, or currently. I don't say that this is what is going to happen. I say that theoretically, this would be a good definition or approach of post-truth, the kind of communicative environment where bullshit as an epistemology has become the norm. And it's a fruitful concept also. Bullshit is used in a lot of recent papers. So this is from it's just an example. I don't want to spend too much time on this figure. It's an example taken from a special issue of this is a journal called Journal of Applied Research in Memory and Cognition, devoted entirely to post-truth. You can check it out. It has a lot of very interesting papers. And just an example, this paper draws some kind of a framework of post-truth, where on one side, when you have bullshit, when you have strong relativistic views on this axis, and a kind of informal rhetorical style aimed at a general audience, this, according to these authors, will lead to bullshit. Here, in a more formal style of realism, these are people claiming to say the truth. They're not relativistic. They call it truthiness. Plain old lies and propaganda, old school propaganda, will be located here. And this, they call it shock and chaos, and it will correspond to the strategies of, say, Russian bots and Russian disinformation, which do not aim at implanting false beliefs in people, but merely to create a disorganized epistemic environment where it's becoming impossible to distinguish the truth from falsity. Again, this is just an example to show that bullshit is currently used in a theoretical and also in empirical studies. I will show a few examples later. Here are a few developments of bullshit. So Frankfurt said that bullshit, the essence of bullshit is indifference to the concept of truth. Other authors have said that, well, this is okay, but it's insufficient. And so, for instance, this author says that you need indifference towards truth, but you also need some type of overconfidence to produce bullshit. It's interesting. Other authors have said that, in fact, you can reduce the idea of bullshit to something that would look like a fake assertion, or a fake assertion that should also be noxious, it should be dangerous, it should be just evil and bad. Otherwise, it's just otherwise it wouldn't be bullshit. More interestingly, perhaps, instead of indifference towards truth, some authors say that bullshit, in fact, should be conceptualized as indifference towards knowledge. This would make things clearer. And more recently, authors have said that bullshit is actually disregard towards the question under discussion, and it should be performative. As in the mission statement of your university, bullshit is performative. Once you have said the bullshit, it's enough to accomplish what it's supposed to say. That's how bullshit works. That's what happens when you call a helpline and some electronic voice says that your call matters to the company, that your call is important to us. Of course, your call is not important to the company, but merely by saying that your call is important to us, you have accomplished the importance of your call. And this is the performative side of bullshit. So I will add that this is all interesting. I would add that bullshit is a kind of communicative masquerade. And this is how I interpret the definition of post-truth. So remember that post-truth has been defined as the circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So this distinguishes on one side objective facts, on the other side emotion and personal belief. Well, it seems to me, in fact, that it's more complicated than that. Post-truth, I see it as emotional and personal belief trying to look at objective facts. And this is a very striking fact of post-truth and bullshit in general. And I think we haven't talked enough about this type of paradox. This paradox...
Tu dois finir rapidement.
OK, j'ai bientôt fini. So the paradox is that, take pseudoscientists, for instance. Pseudoscientists despise science. They say that scientists are corrupt. They say that scientists cheat. They say that scientists are lying to us. They say that we shouldn't trust scientists. But still, they're trying to look like scientists, and pseudoscience strives to look like science. They have conferences, they have their own journals, they have charts and graphs and statistics, they have lab coats, and so forth. So think about it. Pseudoscientists try to look like scientists. Lies, in order to work, have to look like the truth. Fake news have to look like legitimate news. Disinformation must look like information. Denialism of all kinds tries to look like controversy and doubt. Conspiracy theories try to look like critical thinking. After all, they're just asking questions, right? That's critical thinking if you're just asking questions. And of course, trolling is trying to look like debate or rational debate. Bullshit is trying to look like genuine inquiry and concern for the truth. And this is the masquerading facet of bullshit that I call a bullshit epistemology. I will end with the definition of bullshit epistemology, and so I will skip the empirical examples that I had prepared. So bullshit epistemology basically is a pseudo way of knowing that it's attempting to pass, or that it's mistaking itself for a genuine or legitimate way of knowing. It cannot achieve knowledge because of its methods, because it's corrupt, because it's not meant to achieve knowledge. It's just meant to look like knowledge. And it has a few properties. First of all, bullshit epistemology will often use a ready-made assertion. They will use ready-made opinions. And this is a striking aspect of conspiracy theories, is that usually you have a few people that made up of concoct the conspiracy theory. And all the rest, they adopt the ready-made conspiracy theory. They choose to believe in it or not. So a conspiracy theorist is not an inquirer, is not someone investigating something, is someone adopting the pseudo-investigation of someone else. Bullshit epistemologies oftentimes work like this, and it's also performative. Usually it's enough that you have an opinion or idea to make it true. You don't have to explain it, you don't have to research it, you don't have to prove it, you just have to have it to make it true. Of course, it's lazy, but it's very cost efficient. It's cheap. That's the point of a bullshit epistemology. You don't need to work too much to think that you know things. And even better, it's cognitively opaque. Usually you don't realize that you're adopting a pseudo bullshit epistemology. This is based on processes that are inaccessible to yourself, precisely because of the reasons that you adopt the pseudo-epistemology, and this is based on cognitive and social psychological biases and cognitive, let's say, failures, such as the Dunning-Kruger effect, the confirmation bias, and so forth. Conveniently, pseudo ways of knowing, bullshit epistemologies are vague enough. This allows to be unaccountable. This allows you to be to have some impunity, right? You always have some plausible deniability when you adopt a bullshit epistemology, because you can always say that that's not what I meant, that's not what I have in mind, you don't understand what I say. And this is, of course, classic in the type of obscure academic bullshit that is vague and is obscure and it's pseudo-profound. You cannot say that it's wrong, you cannot have an objection, because the author will always have a way to wiggle out of the objections thanks to the vagueness of the assertion. And it's very self-rewarding, again, because it's cheap and it allows you to have a personal type of epistemology that is different from the mainstream arrogant type of scientific or rational type of epistemologies that the people that you despise usually have. It's self-rewarding because it makes you look like an original thinker. And the irony, of course, is that it's not original. Usually it's ready-made assertions that you adopt that you borrow from someone else. So very shortly, this was the idea of bullshit epistemologies. Now there is data on these different types of ideas, but I just wanted to introduce on a theoretical way the idea of bullshit epistemology, hoping that it could help to see clearer in the social world, as it did in the natural world when people started studying mimicry, masquerade, and camouflage without trying to solve the problem. Thank you.